Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Hello and welcome to the Skeptic Zone for, let's see now, it's the 20th of October, 2013, episode number 261. Richard Saunders here with you from Sydney, Australia, and oh, my friends, there are people not too far away from here having a terrible time right now with wildfires, bushfires up in the mountains near Sydney. It's quite dramatic, and I can't underestimate or downplay the seriousness of the situation. You might want to run to various news websites to see how it's going when you're listening to this around the world, but it is most serious, and our thoughts are with those people up in the mountains battling fires, hopefully being prepared and hopefully saving what they can. But let's look to this week's Skeptic Zone. Coming up at the top of the show, Dr Rachie reports. Dr Rachie will be chatting with Dr Dave Hawkes from the Florey Institute in Melbourne about naming viruses. Well, sort of about naming viruses. This is, I guess you could say this week on the Skeptic Zone, we have a real science focus. So naming viruses and crowdsourcing and funding of science, very important information with Dr Rachie coming up at the top of the show. And then after that, I go down to Sydney Harbour and speak to Dr Emma Johnston from the Sydney Institute of Marine Science. Now, Emma Johnston was so nice giving me her time, taking me around the institution there down by the water of Sydney Harbour, which was so beautiful. We have a look at some fish tanks, and she explains really interesting facts about Sydney Harbour and the health, the well-being of Sydney Harbour, which is one of the world's great waterways, I guess you could say. After that, it's a week in science from Dr. Paul Willis and the Royal Institute of Australia, talking about vasectomies. Yes, talking about the unkindest cut of all. Now, it's all very serious stuff. It's a bit of fun, though. You'll see why. You'll hear why soon with a week in science from the Royal Institute of Australia. Then to round off the show, Maynard's spooky action with more reports from SkeptiCamp Sydney. Maynard will be speaking to a couple of presenters there. One is our very own rutbag Peter Bowditch about how he handles legal threats that come his way when he gets them. Oh boy, if you're familiar with his website, ratbags.com, you'll understand why. And Vanessa will talk about her research into the history of the future. Yes, the history of the future. What do people think the future will be like? Well, I know what my future is going to be like. I'm going to run downstairs. I'm going to open the fridge. I'm going to have a nice ginger beer. I'm going to keep those people in the mountains in my thoughts while we all listen to The Skeptic Zone.
Now it's time for Dr. Rachie Reports with Dr. Rachael Dunlop.
So welcome to Dr. David Hawkes, who's joining me today on Skype from Melbourne. David works in neuroscience at the Florey Research Institute in Victoria in Melbourne. And he's with us today to discuss a new crowdsourcing project that he's coordinating through the Florey and for his work involving viruses, and it's called Name the Virus. So welcome to the Skeptic Zone, Dave.
Hi, Rachel. Thanks for having me back on.
No worries. We talked to you quite recently, actually, didn't we, about one of your recent papers. And so now you've got a new project starting where you're going to be crowdsourcing science research. So can you tell us a little bit about Name the Virus?
Certainly. I guess one of the things is I've always had links to the arts community, and so when the opportunity to have to involve people with actually funding science came up, I really jumped at the chance. So Name the Virus is the name of our campaign, and what we're trying to do is raise $10,000, and that $10,000 will allow us to make 4 of a type of virus called a viral vector. Now, viral vectors don't cause disease, they don't have any bad effects, they're not infectious, but what they can do is they can go into a cell and change the way a cell acts. Now, in terms of the human brain. We don't know what most cells do, or if we know what the cell does, we don't know what the connections it does with the rest of the brain. With 100 billion cells in the brain, that's a lot of connections. So these viruses, you can go on and you can find out what a cell does when it's excited, or what certain proteins do, and this is why I use these viral vectors. So the 4 viral vectors we're trying to get going will help us work on research. Some of our previous viruses are currently being used to look at anxiety, eating and sleeping disorders, multiple sclerosis, epilepsy, memory, learning. There's probably a few others that have slipped my mind at the moment.
So this is quite a new approach to raising money for science, isn't it? This is through the well-known crowdsourcing portal called Possible, but this is the first time Possible has been offering a scientific research arm to their platform. Is that right?
Yeah, so what happened was they gave a little bit of trial earlier in the year, and there was a project called Mighty Maggots, which actually got a lot of interest with Dr. Mel Thompson through Twitter, and this was sort of dipping their toe in the water, and they did quite well. Most of the projects got funded, so they were so interested, and the interest from the scientific community was so large that as of Monday, which is when our project launches, which I think is the 21st, they're actually launching an entire research arm. So the Florey has 6 projects in. I think Deakin has a few more in. And then in the coming month or 2 months, there's Monash University, UTS, and a few others are also going to join. And it will be a way for the scientific community to actually create bonds with the wider community. I mean, one of the reasons I'm doing the $10,000 is certainly very nice, but it's that I grew up in the outer suburbs of Melbourne, and I think it's similar for most people who grow up in sort of suburbia. I didn't know any scientists. I didn't have any real knowledge of how science happens. So anyone who gives a donation, we're going to just keep you in touch with what's happening with the project, and the ups, the downs, when things work, when things don't work. Maybe give you an idea of what science is, and hopefully some kids or even adults who are looking to get into the field will get a bit of a more realistic idea.
Yeah, so I was going to ask you about that, Dave, because obviously you want some sort of hooks for people to get involved in the project, and the whole point of crowdsourcing is so people get something back from what they give you. So do you have levels of donations for which you get increasingly higher benefits, or how are you going to work that sort of tiered donation?
Okay, well, I mean, you're completely correct that it's all about sort of the rewards with crowdsourcing. So $20 is sort of the first reward we offer, and what we'll do is we'll give you a thank you on our Twitter, which is Name the Virus 1, or on our Facebook, which is just Name the Virus. And the other thing you'll do is you can actually submit a name. So, if Dr. Rachie gets on there and she donates $20, she can actually suggest Skeptic Zone. And if we get more than $2,500 worth of donations with the name Skeptic Zone, we'll name the virus that. So if you want to call it the Melbourne virus, you want to call it the Skeptic Zone virus, you can actually get very creative, obviously. The other thing is, if you've got $2,500 and you want to donate that as a block, you can obviously get to name the virus. Now, it's about 10 letters, and it has to be socially acceptable. So I imagine I've probably offended a few people, and a lot of ideas are flying out the window at the moment. But, it can be Holden HSV, it can be Ford, you can call it whatever you want, and we'll name the viral vector off you. Probably the one that I think is the one I'm most nervous about is our $500 reward, which is you come to the Florey, and I'll give you a tour of where we make the viruses. And the Florey, for anyone who doesn't know, is in the middle of the Parkville University precinct, and it's about 5 floors high, and we've got a tea room that looks out over Royal Park, and it's quite lovely. And for $500, I'll not only give you the tour, I'll cook you a meal.
Oh my gosh, really?
Yeah, I've for about 2 years, I've been cooking my way and posting on Facebook recipes from Jamie Oliver's America Road Trip Cookbook.
Uh-huh.
I'm a big fan of his style, and I'm a big fan of American food. So I've done about 60 or 70 of the recipes. And so if you come along, you'll get a tour, and then obviously while I'm cooking, you can have a chat. You can ask any questions you've got about science, and enjoy a beautiful view from the 5th floor of the Florey.
So that sounds great. But even people that can't afford to give, say, that much money, even if we drop in $10 or $20, how can we follow the progress of the project? What sort of social media are you going to have running at the same time? Will you have a website? How can we follow it?
Absolutely. The conversation with people and people getting involved is what I'm really interested in. So name the virus, or words one. So at Name the Virus 1. On Twitter, where we've been going for a couple of months, so you can sort of see what we're doing. We've got some nice sort of links and pictures there. Also a bit of information about viral vectors, and we'll sort of be obviously keeping track of that while the project's going, and even afterwards. We've got Name the Virus on Facebook. And the other thing is, anyone who donates, we're also going to keep in touch. We'll keep you in touch with emails. Obviously, if you don't want to, that's not a problem. But I want to start a conversation with people because, you know, I've been on Twitter for nearly a year now, and the amount of people that ask me questions, they're going, it's bugged me for years, I don't understand it, can you just explain it? I've tried to read it, I've looked at Dr. Google, I don't get it. And there's 4 of us on the project, so there's a variety of different skill sets, and obviously we just want to actually talk about science, and obviously viral vectors, neuroscience is the topic we're looking at here, but, you know, I'm more than happy to branch out or direct them to someone who can.
So I think you raise a really interesting point, Dave, and that is focusing on communicating the science to people. Now, scientists are often criticised for that, and I'm quite critical of scientists for doing that too, because I think it's incredibly important for us to talk about our work openly. So in terms of crowdsourcing, I think it covers 2 areas quite well. One is funding for science, which is seriously tight at the moment and getting harder, and also letting people know what we do, because I think it's unfair of us to boffin away in our labs without talking to the public. And I think, do you agree that this will hopefully open up more of a public understanding of science as well, so that eventually we might be able to get some more, attract some more government funding, for example?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that I think I'm trying to remember the grants that go in each year that researchers spend a lot of time. I think they're getting funded, about 16% will get funded this year, which is not a heap, obviously. And we can talk to government, but I think that if a lot of people don't do science beyond high school, and a lot of people don't realise how much of their lives is run by science. I mean, the classic is Wi-Fi is an Australian invention from the physicists who we occasionally mention and acknowledge. But as biologists, we've sort of, there's so many things that we're involved in. I'm trying to understand why we get anxious and why we get anxiety conditions, because they affect our blood pressure, which can, you know, increase your chance of heart attack or stroke. And a lot of people, everyone understands stress. Everyone gets stressed, and everyone kind of goes, oh, it's not good, or it's kind of natural, or it's fight or flight. And that's kind of where most people end up. But if they knew that people are actually researching this and understanding it, or there's this scientist who's published a paper on blue-green algae and motor neuron disease. You might have seen it.
Never heard of it. What?
And that was another one where people can kind of go, oh, I get this. I can see that science isn't a book kept in a library. Science is a living, breathing thing. It's a way of finding knowledge. And so if people can actually talk to a scientist and realise that we're not all, number one, male, old, white-haired, which is the stereotypes. Like, I've rocked up to schools. I've done a lot of schools visits, and for anyone who hasn't seen me, I'm about 6 foot tall. I'm about 90 kilos. I've got a number of tattoos, and I've got a shaved head. So a lot of people kind of often go, I'm sorry, we asked for a scientist. But exactly the same thing happens if you send out a young woman or a woman. A lot of the time they go, I'm sorry. And you would obviously be more experienced with this. They expect scientists to be old men. And so by having that interaction that, this scientist is the same age as you, follows the same football team or a different one, people kind of understand that, oh, so these are people, same as me, doing stuff, and this is why they're doing it. And if you've got an educated, and I don't want everyone to become scientists because it's competitive enough, but if people understand science, they won't be, number one, fooled by things like power bands and homeopathy. Number two, they'll go, well, okay, we're putting for every dollar we invest in medical research, we can save up to $6 in the healthcare system. Now, I can tell that to politicians, and they hear that every day. But if the entire community understands that, they tell their politicians, and it's much easier to have 10,000 voices telling their local member that than one person who gets a one-on-one meeting. If I don't get the crowdfunding, my work will go on. It just might be, a little bit slower. Like, I've got machines there the machine that spins the virus is $120,000. So the $10,000 is sort of a way to kickstart the conversation with people, because what I'd love to happen is for people to get on board, people to understand it, people to be really passionate about it, people to be able to follow their scientists, which would be me, and to be able to sort of go, oh yeah, we know Dave. He's, I was on that project, or I got together with my Rotary Club and we donated the money, and now we're on a paper. Because if you donate $1,000, you'll actually get your name on the next scientific paper we publish with it. Viruses are cool. No matter what, if you look at Hollywood, viruses are cool. The last Bourne film was about viral vectors, which is what I work in. You look at I Am Legend is about a viral vector. It's all about viruses. So it's kind of cool, and brains are where research is. So you're combining two of the sexiest parts of science and making them accessible for people. So hopefully people will jump on board and start this conversation.
Great. So, Dave, you launch tomorrow. Can you give us...
We launch tomorrow.
Okay. So can you give us all the details of where everyone needs to go to follow you and like you and give you monies?
No worries. So, as I sort of said, the Name the Virus one on Twitter, so at Name the Virus 1, Name the Virus on Facebook. If you go to Pozible, which is POZIBLE.com, I know you're in America, so POZIBLE.com, and just look for Name the Virus. We'll be up there. I think we're launching at midday tomorrow. The other thing is I'm on Twitter at Mr. Hawks, MRHAWKES, so even if you can't donate, come and give me a yell, and hopefully, you can get on board with understanding sort of some of the science things. We'd love to get your money, but if you can't afford it, that's not a problem. Just come and say hi at either the Twitter accounts or the Facebook, and hopefully you can learn a little bit about what we do, and you'll find it interesting.
All right. Well, Dave, how long is the project going to run for?
I think we're running for about 45 days. So if we get our $10,000 earlier, we'll keep going, because, as I said, it's about $2,500 a virus. So if we get the 10 grand, that's 4. If we get 12.5 grand, that's 5, and so on. So we'll go for the full 45 days, because if you guys give me more money, I can certainly do some stuff with it.
Great. Well, good luck with it, Dave, and thanks for talking to us today on the Skeptic Zone.
No worries. Thanks for having me on.
In a world where the truth is a matter of opinion, where messages are received from beyond the grave, and reason is sidelined for magical thinking, only 3 men stand between the truth and a postmodernist abyss.
What date is it? 7th, 8th? 7th, 8th?
This is impressive.
These are artist impressions.
They're not. They're photographs of Chinese lanterns.
It's not. It's not.
We are not well researched.
Yeah, because...
Good God, we're full
we
of...
We don't discuss cryptozoology on this show very often, because we don't know anything about it.
That's true. That is true.
The price gets lower and lower and lower, and then he hits a ceiling?
It's a ceiling from the room below.
Skeptics with a K from the Merseyside Skeptic Society. Find us on iTunes. Or, don't.
What a beautiful day it is here at Sydney Harbour. I'm at Chowder Bay. I'm on a little pier here looking out. It's gorgeous. There's not a cloud in the sky. It's a nice warm day. I can see a seaplane over there to my left. There's some ferries way over to my right. And I'm with Dr. Emma Johnston. Hello.
Hello, how are you?
I'm having a wonderful day here. You've kindly invited me here to discuss something which I find very interesting and very important, of course, which is the health and the well-being and the science of Sydney Harbour.
That's right. So I'm Director of the Sydney Harbour Research Program for the Sydney Institute of Marine Science. And it's a fantastic job because we have got a spectacularly beautiful harbour, but it's also incredibly biologically diverse. It has some challenges, and so the health of the harbour is a very important topic that we tackle in the Sydney Harbour Research Program. But it's also days like this that make me just super happy to have this job.
It's folks, it's hard to describe just how beautiful it is, the setting. There's a beach behind us. I can see some joggers and a dog over there. The water is lapping along these old historic area here. And you were telling me that that little funny pool or empty pool we see over there used to be used to construct mines.
That's right. So we're located at a heritage site. We've done some work with the buildings so that we can do scientific research in them. So there's laboratories, but we've tried to retain the outside of the buildings to be very similar to what they've been in the past, which is gorgeous. So there are sandstone blocks, obviously, as the foundation for most of these buildings, and then these beautiful weatherboard structures. But it was actually a mine construction facility. So they used to make mines when they were worried about the Russians, in fact.
The Russians
coming into Sydney Harbour.
Yeah,
but unfortunately they had a terrible accident one day in front of the governor and many, many thousands of spectators where some of the mines accidentally blew up at the wrong time, and 4 people were killed and 11 injured. So this place was shut down before it had an opportunity to do much great work.
Oh dear.
But fortunately for us, the facilities are still in good nick. We have this gorgeous pier which has been restored.
It is wonderful.
And if you look into the water,
you're just
you can
peering
see,
over the pier.
That's right. You can see some of the lovely life of Sydney Harbour.
We see banks of, what's this?
That's kelp.
Kelp?
So that's a Clonia radiata, which is our major temperate water kelp in the
lovely
region.
blue-green water today at the moment.
Yeah. The kelp forms almost forests, kind of shrub
I've
height
heard that.
forests.
Kelp forests. Yes.
That's right, kelp forest. So it's a very important habitat form. A lot of fish species, a lot of urchins and a kind of...
Is that a fish?
Yes, you can see the fish.
I can see a fish,
Yep, wandering around.
Yeah.
And then if you look further onto the hard substrates, you can see what we have in Sydney Harbour, classic in the intertidal zone, lots and lots of healthy oysters.
Yes.
Filter feeding.
These old pylons here, which are just a couple of metres out in front of us, the bases are covered with oysters. And kelp.
So that's the Sydney rock oyster. And just below the Sydney rock oyster, before you hit the kelp, you've got this ring of sea squirts, which are called kanji. Yeah.
Yes, I remember those from when I was a kid at the beach. Yes.
That's right. And people often use them, the inside of them, for bait. So they'll get the kanji and take the inside. In other countries, sea squirts are actually eaten as well. So in Japan, they're a delicacy. Yeah, I haven't tried them myself.
I'm not that tempted to either myself right now. So you work in a very, well, what an idyllic place. Oh, there goes the Manly Ferry if we look over there to our...
That's right, and there's a fellow having a swim off the back of a yacht just behind us.
And there's a guy having a swim off the back of a yacht.
Clothed.
Fortunately, he's clothed.
That's right. Yeah, so we do work in a very spectacular spot, and one of the reasons why Sydney Harbour is so beautiful and people can see that the water is often of a very good quality, you know, as you said, we can see through the water quite a few metres here. That's not the case for every estuary, and Sydney Harbour is blessed by the fact that we're a drowned river valley, so we have rocky walls lining the valley. Yeah, many years ago, millions and millions of years ago, this was one river lake bed, essentially. And over millions of years, lots of sands and muds were brought into that lake and compacted into our sandstone and our mudstone and our shale. And then there was a great big uplift about 12 million years ago, and the Parramatta River and all of the other river and its tributaries started flowing through the sandstone, etching really deep areas into that sandstone. Then, at the end of the last glacial, we had the sea levels rise, and they came in from about 30 kilometres out. From 30 kilometres out to the east, they came in and drowned this river valley, and that's why we have such incredibly complex structure in Sydney Harbour. When you fly in to Sydney, it's absolutely spectacular. The complexity of this harbour, lots of nooks and crannies. And what that provides is a huge range of environmental conditions. So we have very shallow shoals, beaches that you can walk across literally, down to 45 metres deep in the
45 metres deep. That's quite impressive.
It's the only estuary in Australia that doesn't require maintenance dredging, regular maintenance dredging, because of the depth that we have. And because the sediments are not retained as much, they're kind of flushed out into the ocean. So we get this flushing every day, providing lots of fresh, clean water into most of the system, and then those sandstone walls that are not retaining a lot of the sediments.
So let's chat about some of the science that goes on here and your role in it. It's not just for scientific interest and curiosity and learning. This is actually very important work being undertaken to understand more for the health of our harbour, isn't it?
That's right. So unless we join together as marine scientists, it's very difficult for us to tackle location-specific problems. Estuaries around the world are the most stressed of all of our marine systems, and that's because we tend to congregate around estuaries. We put our industry, we put our houses, we use the water in those areas, and so they're usually subject to lots of different stresses. In Sydney Harbour, for example, 50% of the shoreline has actually been modified by seawalls, for example.
50%?
Or pier pilings. Yeah, 50%.
That's staggering, because the harbour is huge.
That's right, and we've gone from 15 islands within the harbour to 9. Now, it's not that we've dug up the islands. We've actually built out the land to meet those islands, so they're no longer islands.
And that you can hear in the background is one of the famous seaplanes that darts around Sydney.
That's right.
Yeah.
And then on top of all that, we've also used the harbour, and all the way around the world, we continue to use marine areas as waste dumping grounds.
Ah, yes.
So in the 50s, 60s, 70s, you'd think twice about jumping into the harbour for a swim. And since we had the EPA in Australia, so Environmental Pollution Authority, the water quality has improved massively because it's now licensed what you can release.
Well, I mean, if we look behind us here to this lovely beach, which is not really being used today because it's a bit early in the season, I imagine in the summertime it's packed and people happily swimming.
Absolutely, and they're swimming quite safely as long as it hasn't rained recently. But some of the big research questions that we're tackling, for example, are relevant globally. The results will be useful to parameterise water quality models for estuaries around the globe, but they're hot topics here as well. So we're able to get teams of researchers together. We get chemists, analytical chemists, we get microbial ecologists, we get macrofaunal ecologists, we get hydrologists and physicists and geomorphologists. Team them up together. You really need a huge range of skills for this.
It almost sounds like a song. You could put all those words together and make a great song.
That's true, actually. A Gilbert and Sullivan kind of.
Yes.
Yeah, I wish I was more eloquent and could manage that. But no, sometimes I feel like I should be. So we conduct these people together into a lovely orchestra. And so the Sydney Institute of Marine Science is built for that purpose. It's built to bring people together from the different universities, from the different research organisations, from the museum, from the government.
Yeah.
And it's when you get these nice syntheses of people and these matching of skills that you can tackle environmental problems, because you actually need every one of those skills. One big issue is how does the contamination in the sediments of the harbour affect nitrogen cycling and the water quality above?
Yep.
And to do that, you need every one of those people.
Now, what I'll do now is come with me and we'll just walk around the pier here, and I'd love you to take me on a little tour of the aquarium building.
I'd really like to show you the aquarium. There's so much going on here and it's brand new.
Now, we've come in here to a wonderful building down by the water here. There are many tubs on either side of me with rocks, and lots over here, some sea urchins, I think.
This is our wonderful new aquarium building. We have lots of different spaces, lots of different experiments being run simultaneously because there's so many different tubs. And we can also control the water temperature, we can control the carbon dioxide levels in the water, we can do all sorts of manipulative experiments.
And fascinating. Now let's have a look at these tubs along here, for example. They don't look like there's too much going on. I mean, there's
these are really just holding tubs.
Yeah, so there's some seaweed in there, I see.
Yeah, that's right. There's some Maclonia, which is one of our local kelps, and there's some sea urchins that are munching down on that. So these are just holding tanks until the experiments are ready to start.
And you were, as we walked in, you were telling me there's another room over there which is sealed, so you can actually have very nasty diseases in experiment.
That's right. So that's a PC2 aquarium facility, and we can do all sorts of manipulations in there, as well as work with organisms that would otherwise be dangerous to let out in the wild. So we know that anything in there is not going to get out alive. So you can do experiments with disease resistance, for example, or with virulent, that's a hard word to say, organisms that might otherwise be quite dangerous to have in the outside world. Completely sealed. Everything that comes out of that is totally zapped before it gets out there, so there's no chance of it being alive.
Wow. Just walk around here, and there are many rows of these tanks. Oh, got little buckets here.
What she's doing?
And hello. And what's your job here?
I'm just currently building my experiment, which I'll be starting next week, hopefully, if all goes to plan.
Yep.
So I'm just setting up iPads above my tanks to film my animals and how they move around. And
that's interesting. I can see it's just in the process of being set up. So you're going to have iPads facing down, or the camera facing down to the...
Well, there's some great apps on iPads that will actually track animals.
No.
So it's a cheap way of kind of filming them without having to be there and spend a lot of time constantly looking at them or taking photos. And
how good is that? So you're going to just plug them in somewhere and just let them run?
Yeah, exactly that.
That's fascinating. Well, I wish you every success. What an interesting place it is you have to do your research.
Yeah, no, it's great using these facilities. And
thank you. Well, folks, there you go. There you are, another use for the tablet technology.
That's right. There's all sorts of new things that are being done with GoPro cameras and iPads, and we're getting a lot more visual representations of what happens under the water, not only in laboratories like this and aquaria, but also out in the real world. So a lot of use of GoPro cameras now. They are underwater cameras, and they pick up a lot of light so that we can get lots of visual images to try and start to understand animal behaviour under the water. It's something that is really difficult to study, has been in the past due to limited scuba time, and now we're really getting a lot more visual representation.
And it's getting cheaper to do.
Absolutely. And so we have a lot of student projects, and they're spending a lot of time setting up the cameras, but then dealing with it back in the lab, just watching hours and hours and hours of video can be quite time consuming.
I bet. Now I'm peering through another window here into a little room. What's this happening in here?
So what we've done is we've created controlled temperature aquarium facilities, which means that we can set the temperature of this room, and there's 3 of these rooms. We might set one at 18, we might set one at 22, we might set one at 26, and that will give different environmental conditions for the animals that we're working with. We're particularly interested in climate change because New South Wales and Sydney Harbour it's a climate change hotspot with regards to temperature, and that's because the East Australian current is strengthening. We know it's strengthening, and it pumps down warm water from the tropics straight down the east coast. And this particular point here is where we're seeing the largest changes in the temperature. So this area, 2 or 3 degrees, really rapid changes in temperature, simply because that East Australian current is coming down further.
Really?
Before it spins off and peels off from the coast.
Yeah.
So particularly interested in the tropical species that are coming down. A lot of tropical fish species are brought down, just like in Nemo. They're actually brought down on the East Australian current, and they come into the harbour every year. They survive the summer, but up until now, most of them have not been able to overwinter, so they won't survive through the winter. So they don't establish populations, but we're just getting to the point where the mean minimum water temperature is sufficiently high that we will start to see them overwintering. And then there's
that
a
could
potential...
change things dramatically, I guess.
Total change in the harbour ecosystem. We call it tropicalisation. So we're potentially seeing a huge suite of new largely herbivorous fish species coming into the harbour. So we're expecting major ecosystem change over the next 10, 20 years.
I had no idea.
Yeah, and it's not something that you can stop.
No.
It's not something that you can put a grid on the front of the harbour and not let them in. It's something that we have to work with and try and reduce the other stresses in the system so that the system is resilient enough to deal with this massive ecosystem change.
Good heavens, the things you learn.
We We're working on smaller organisms here, so urchins and small fish, a lot of different invertebrates and a lot of algae, but we do have some larger tanks here, which are for the larger
we've just
fish.
come into another room here with... Oh!
Yeah, this one is not in use at the moment.
It's about, 1.5 meters across. It's a very big round sort of tank made out of fiberglass, I guess.
So we do a lot of research in conjunction with Fisheries, which is a New South Wales Government department, and they're particularly interested in some of the fish that are important recreational fish. So in the past, these tanks have been used to hold mulloway for mulloway stocking programs. So they might grow up the juvenile mulloway and then release them into estuaries to actually attempt to increase the population of those recreationally important fish.
And there's all sorts of engines and pumps and filters, and I think that one's, there it is just behind me, it's just gone off.
Beautiful soundscape here.
It is wonderful.
Shall we have a look down the pier?
Let's walk and stroll out to the pier. Wow, that was quite an experience to be in the aquarium. Now we've come back out to this wonderful pier. Now, you don't keep your light under a bushel. How can people find out more about the fascinating... Oh, hello, what's this? We're being invaded by a helicopter. There it goes. It must be Channel 7 News, I think. How can people find out more about what it's all about?
Well, a big part of our Sydney Harbour research program is outreach, and we're trying to reach out to a huge range of audiences. But for starters, if you're anywhere in the world, you can just hop onto our website, so the Sydney Harbour Research Program website, and you can see all the different projects we're up to. There's lots of information about the harbour as well, if you want to find out, and lots of contact details. So that's your first point of call. And then if you're in the Sydney region, we're running loads of different programs. You can get involved, do lots of education and lots of public talks.
So there's a good, you have a good policy of, for example, involving school groups?
That's right. So we've developed specific programs that are fitting in with the curriculum and that are specifically dealing with issues in Sydney Harbour. And we can go out there and deliver them, or we can get student groups in, which is what we do quite a lot, and they will actually do a part of their course here.
Wow. That's pretty impressive. And I love outreach. I think that's so important because you get people very enthused and interested in it. What's the URL for that website?
harbourprogram.sims.org.au. Now, of course, we spell harbour HARBOUR and program PROGRAM. So a bit of a mesh of the two spellings.
It's a bit of a mesh.
We thought we'd be kind of international about that. So harbourprogram.sims.org.au.
And if there's one last take-home message you'd have for the people of Sydney regarding their harbour, what would that be?
Really, the take-home message is don't just look on the surface and enjoy the sparkling waters. Really look underneath. So if you get an opportunity, get that mask and snorkel on, go for a dip, see what's happening underneath so that you can start to appreciate and empathise with all the animals that are trying to share this lovely place with us.
Good message. Dr. Emma Johnston, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
This is Jay Novella from the Skeptic's Guide to the Universe podcast. Did you know that there are thousands of skeptical reports, interviews, and investigations going back to 1981, free to download? Just visit www.skeptics.com.au. Click the publications link and enjoy almost every back issue of The Skeptic, the journal from Australian skeptics. You can also subscribe online and get the latest digital or hard copy of this, the world's second oldest skeptical magazine. That's www.skeptics.com.au or just Google Australian Skeptics.
This week in science, we saw musical treadmills, restoring the sense of touch, and the inaugural World Vasectomy Day. Plus, Men all around the world put their balls on the line on Friday the 18th of October, World Vasectomy Day. The goal is to start a global conversation about the social, cultural and ethical issues of an ever-increasing population and the effect it has on the planet's finite resources. This world-first vasectomy-a-thon was inspired by documentary filmmaker Jonathan Stack, whose film, The Vasectomist, premieres this week. You can also follow the action snip by snip on the RiAus website. The sense of touch has been replicated using electrical signals in the brain. Using monkeys, scientists stimulated the part of the brain responsible for the sensation of touch, conveying information about how much pressure and what part of the hand it touched. The trained monkeys responded just as if an object had touched their real hand. This is hoped to pave the way for the restoration of a sense of touch for people with prosthetic limbs. Rainbow fish are able to recognise potential threats while still an embryo. Taking vitamin D supplements does not increase bone mineral density nor help prevent osteoporosis. Exercise treadmills, which generate music as a result of a person's exertions, leaves that person feeling less exhausted afterwards, and repeatedly viewing images of food may actually decrease your appetite and enjoyment of eating that particular food. Don't forget to check out World Vasectomy Day on the RiAus website. And while you're there, why not subscribe for future episodes of A Week in Science? That's it for this A Week in Science. I'll catch you next week.
Hi, this is Carrie Poppy.
I'm Ross Blotcher.
Oh, hey, Ross.
Hey, we're from a podcast called
Oh No, Ross and Carrie.
We find out what happens when you show up and ask questions.
We've hung out with the Kabbalists,
The Mormons,
we've gone and gotten ear candles,
gone to the Sikhs.
we show up so you don't have to.
So find out where we're going next.
We'll even have special episodes where we have famous guests like Brian Dalton from Mr. Deity.
You heard that awesome theme music? He wrote that.
You should come visit us at onopodcast.com or
facebook.com/onrac.
What the hell's OnRac, Ross?
ONRAC.
Oh no, Ross and Carrie.
That's our show.
That's so smart. Come join us.
Here's Maynard's spooky action at a distance.
Well, people, it's rushing and hushing, and I'm standing here in my elasticized shorts as the excitement of Skeptic Camp washes over all of us. Vanessa, how are you?
I'm well, thank you.
Now, I believe for fun you like to do a sort of fake PhD, which you can present at Skeptic Camp. That's what you like to do, because that was a history of the future you just gave us?
Yeah, it was. It's a master's degree, so it's like a mini PhD, I suppose you could say.
Right. Now, I hope you got a high distinction for that.
It's currently in the process of peer review, so giving that talk was my little peer review process personally, just seeing how people received it. I've never spoken about it before.
Oh, and what degree are you actually doing?
It was a Masters of Science Communication at ANU, so it was half research. So I did a research project looking at the history of the future and looking at people's public images of 2050.
Oh, so with that degree, a good job would be you would communicate the latest research of the CSIRO to the public and not get it confused. Would that be one of the things you would do with that?
That's a possibility, yes.
Or you would write a really good book that would sell millions of copies?
I hope to make millions as an author, yeah.
Well, and now with that there, the history of the future, what do you think is the most consistent thing we can learn from people trying to predict the future? What about, is it Alvin Toffler, Future Shock? Did it have anything in it that is still relevant?
I think having a look at futures literature, say, over the past 100 years, there's a couple of things we can learn. One is that our thoughts of the future are really placed in tropes of the present. So we have a look at things that are happening at this point in time and we say it's going to be more advanced in this way. So we might have a look at, say, at the end of the space race, say, by the year 1995, we're going to have people living on another planet, because that's something that just grows as an extension of the present, right? The other thing that we've learned looking at futures of the past 100 years is that people always have ideas of huge technological progress and place science as a magical thing that can solve all of our problems.
Yes, because I was bringing up cold fusion, zero-point energy, something like, if you had like something that you were able to get lots of energy from that didn't give emissions and didn't decay to heat, so the planet didn't warm up to the temperature of Venus, you would have a completely transformed society.
You would. I hate to think of our planet at 480 odd degrees, which is the temperature of Venus.
Well, if everyone's using energy, it's got to decay to something, and even if you had, it's got to do something. So, everyone just seems to think we can keep building and building. I'm a bit Dick Smith about this. You just can't keep building and building.
We need to change, and change isn't always building. Sometimes it's creating different types of infrastructure or doing things in different ways.
But what about big developments like people willingly giving away their privacy with like social media, and of course the government getting our privacy from us in new ways like that? 10 years ago, you probably wouldn't have even put that in a questionnaire, would you?
Probably not, and I think a lot of people are concerned about that. Something that people talk about a lot in the future is identification, and say if we had a chip or a microchip that we would put in all of us that would have our health records on it, for example. In ways, I think that could be a good thing. Say you were in an accident and ambulance could come along and with some kind of reader just read your chip and find out who you were and what your medical history was. There are benefits to that, but it's also a huge invasion of privacy, because I'm sure that people could create technology that could read everyone's chips on the same bus as them.
Now, what group are the most sceptical about the future from your studies?
The group that is the most sceptical are those who were the most resistant to change. In previous studies, people who live in more developed countries are more accepting of the future and more, I guess, have a better capability to predict future trends. So people that would be less willing to change are often those who live on what is sometimes defined as the peripheries of society. So I guess people who don't have a high level of education or who live in city fringe areas. I don't think that's really a definition anymore, but in studies in history it has been. Okay,
rightio. Well, look, I've got appalling nails, and I've got to admit, on the close-up shots you had there, you've got really good French polish, and you've never got chipped nails. You don't. What's your secret? You have don't bite or something like that?
It's actually shellac.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Right.
So
look at mine; they're horrible compared to that.
Yeah, you need to go and get a manicure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, look,
it lasts for 2 to 3 weeks.
That's the best advice I've had on the future for ages. Thank you for your talk. And what are you looking forward to today here at SkeptiCamp?
Cupcake camp.
Yes, yeah. Cupcake camp. It's the elephant in the room, isn't it? I hear there's a big push on strawberry this year for some reason.
Okay. That's interesting. Perhaps they're in season at the moment.
Oh, yeah. See, I touch a note of scepticism in your voice because you're a chocolate person. Is that why?
No, it's because I said perhaps they're in season. It's a good comment, but I noticed at the supermarket the other day they're quite expensive, so they're probably not.
Okay, well, we'll all see. Thanks, Vanessa.
You're welcome.
Look, I've got to say, it's not often that someone delivers a SkeptiCamp lecture with half a bottle of red already in the bag, Pete.
Well, I think sometimes you just need a little bit of loosening up to get going. I'm a rather shy, laid-back sort of person, and sometimes I need a bit of alcohol in me just to sort of get it going, get the shyness.
And of course, what is your website too, Pete?
It's ratbags.com.
Now, you're a well-known troublemaker, and you were giving an example there. Well, basically, you were just showing us a few of the abusive emails you've got over the years.
Yes. As I said right at the start, if you take any kind of controversial position on the internet, you'd expect some kind of feedback from people who might disagree with you. Some of that disagreement is quite rational and reasonable, but what I was showing today was the stuff that isn't, the sort of thing where people really just go nuts, or they threaten you with legal things.
Yes. Now, what I wanted to find interesting is I asked you a question at the end there, that most people who do you harm or have intent to do you harm don't normally give you a lot of warning. They just go bang, that's it. Most people make a lot of noise and don't do anything, particularly with emails and on the internet. What is the one sure warning sign that you should be very careful of, that it will generate into the real world trouble?
A letter from a real lawyer.
Right.
Really anything else, I've always taken the view that if people can threaten me as much as they like, say what they like about me, but really, I'll say in 14 years, I've only ever had 3 or 4 contacts from actual real lawyers. One of those withdrew in the US. That was a ridiculous court case anyway. They sued about 100 different people, including domain names and people that even didn't exist. One was a lawyer for a quack operation in Sydney, and I simply asked them to produce the evidence these people claimed they had. And I also pointed out that the company had issued a media release saying that the ACCC was corrupt and that they weren't in violation of the Trade Practices Act, which was in violation of their settlement with the ACCC. And I sent that media release to the lawyers, never heard from them again. The other 2 I've been dragged into court. One was with Merrill Dory and the Australian Vaccination Network, who spent just over a year, dragging me to court with its ridiculous apprehended violence order. And the other was a company that had been found by the federal court to be operating a illegal pyramid scheme, and I reported it, and they objected to that and dragged me to court, claiming I was damaging their business.
So your advice, if you do get even an alarming email from someone threatening things, is to not reply at all? Is silence the best reply?
I think so, yes. I reply sometimes to the really crazy ones that are obviously crazy, or ones where people don't seem to make any point at all. If someone actually emails me and says, I am going to sue you, I don't reply. I put it on a web page I've got listing vacuous legal threats with the number of days since the threat was made. And just wait for it to happen, because in most cases they aren't going to do it.
And what category has got you the most hate mail? Is it people that you would consider charlatans, or people that are trading impropriety? Trading incorrectly? What do you reckon would be the biggest category?
The biggest category of all the various things I look at is religion, or I go for religious bigotry, and the anti-vaccination people and alternative medicine people. The rest don't seem to matter. I mean, I gave an example there of something, a Holocaust denier. I get almost nothing from them at all. Yet I've said some really nasty things about them. Well, who wouldn't?
And so the idea is to probably, when you do get these crackpot emails or even threatening emails or what you consider to be strange emails, should you even run them past anyone else, or is it just enough to put them in a quiet little file and not look at them again? I've
seen enough of them now to know, I think, when they're serious. Like I say, if it turns up from a lawyer, then you know it's serious. But that generally don't turn up by email with that. It'll turn up in post. I had one man who paid a lawyer in Melbourne to write me a letter. Reading between the lines, the lawyer had actually typed this letter beautifully, and immediately followed by typing an invoice, I assume. And between the lines was, there is this lunatic in my office, and the only way I can get rid of him is by typing this letter to you.
Right, I see. Okay.
If letters from lawyers have to be responded to. Simple threats, someone saying, I'm going to sue you, I don't respond to that, other than saying, well, get on with it.
Okay. What do you think of the focus of this year's SkeptiCamp?
Well, like most skeptic camps, there's actually no real focus.
They're all over the place. We've had some controversy already, haven't we?
Yes. Yeah. I didn't go to the controversial talk. I was at somewhere else, but I believe that it was extremely controversial.
Look, the only thing that can beat that controversy is the cupcake competition that comes up later. It's always controversial.
Yes, it is. That's right. Particularly because most of the entries this time seem to be from the people who organised the cupcake camps.
Ooh, yeah.
So I've actually, and the problem is one of them is my daughter, so I can't give her the prize because that would be seen as nepotism. The other two are friends of mine, so obviously nepotism. I'm not quite sure how we're going to actually judge this and do it.
I think you should be disqualified from it. That's the simple guess.
Well, that'll save me buying a bottle of wine to give us the prize, won't it? I'd save money that way.
Well, you drank it anyway, Pete.
Well, I drank it, that's right. Oh, actually, I didn't. That was someone else's wine I drank. Actually, as I said before, I have actually been on stage with a glass in my hand before, and the last time I got halfway through a double facepalm with a beer in my hand before I realised that this was a bad idea.
Virtual Skeptics is a weekly web show in which we discuss the latest news in skepticism.
Whether it's a new case of spontaneous human combustion, a conspiracy theory, the latest update on the upcoming robot apocalypse, tech news for skeptics, or the latest wacky religious claim, we cover it all.
We record the show live as a Google Plus on-air hangout, so join us and our host, Brian Gregory, for an hour of mostly intelligent talk every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern U.S. time.
Watch us at virtualskeptics.com and participate in the show on our hashtag VirtualSkeptics.
The Virtual Skeptics. It's like Meet the Press, but with chupacabras.
Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone. Now, my friends, not long to go now before the Australian Skeptics National Convention in Canberra. There are tickets still left, not many. I think they're down to the last few. I wonder if they might even contemplate releasing some more seats. I'm not sure if they are going to do that. They might have to, because I know the demand for tickets has been quite good, although you can still get some tickets. And I hope you do. The Australian Skeptics National Convention is always a lot of fun. nationalskepticsconvention.org is the website you need to run to. And one of the wonderful things about the convention this year is all the fringe events revolving around the convention, which are absolutely free. There's a science night on Friday night of the convention at the CSIRO Discovery Centre with yours truly, Dr Rachie, Christopher French and other people explaining, chatting about, being there for science, absolutely free, and other events. Run to their website and find out more. What a great idea. And I must thank the Minnesota Skeptics very much. Thank you, Minnesota Skeptics. Ufta, I think they say there. Something like that. It's Norwegian, never mind. They sent me their T-shirt. Skeptical Lunar Skeptical, it says, and I wore that proudly around Sydney, and I'll continue to do so. Minnesota Skeptics, I thank you very much. And I'll put a link to your website on the show notes for this week, or you could just Google Minnesota Skeptics, you'll find them. And before I go, thank you to all those people who do subscribe to the Skeptic Zone. You don't have to. You can enjoy it for free, and I'm so pleased you do. But if you want to chip in, and, well, quite frankly, if people didn't chip in, there would be no Skeptic Zone. I couldn't afford to do this without the financial support of people just like you. Chip in less than $1 a week. It's money you'll never miss, but collectively, it means a lot to the Skeptic Zone. It keeps the Skeptic Zone going. How about this? Why not do it for a month? If you've never chipped into the Skeptic Zone, why not kick $4 my way simply by subscribing for a month? At the end of the month, thank you very much. I appreciate that very much. And you don't have to do it anymore, or you can continue if you wish. It really does help. Visit www.skepticzone.tv. And again, a big thank you to those people who do regularly chip in $1 or sometimes even more a week. Over the years, we've managed to do things like buy equipment for the Skeptic Zone, microphones for Dr. Rachie, for example, and our announcer, Jim Wilsh, has got a microphone, other bits and pieces. It's all been really great, including, my friends, a couple of years ago, due to the generosity of Skeptic Zone listeners, we were able to get Maynard a ticket to Las Vegas where he reported on TAM, and those reports lasted for months. It was fantastic stuff. Look forward to more reports from Maynard from the Australian Skeptics National Convention. So your contribution actually really does go a long way. Coming up on next week's show, we're going to be speaking to a Norwegian author about his book on the placebo effect. And until then, until next week, this is Richard Saunders. And come here, come on. Hello. And Fred the cat. Yes, come on, Fred. Hello, Fred. Signing off from Sydney, Australia. Do you want some dinner?
You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone. Visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for comments, contacts, and extra video reports.